This is Alberic, and like many Frenchmen before him, he has a burning desire to colonize. Conveniently for him, Lustria is a land without any courts to judge his actions. So we begin with a small outpost, and I'm already getting some reports of the local wildlife eating my crops. Thankfully for us though, we're a bunch of Bretonnian knights, and the woes of the peasants don't matter. But the leathery skin on these creatures do make for some pretty good handbags, and I'm gonna need some cash to enact my plan. Now, strangely enough, these creatures do seem organized, but I don't hear them speaking no French, so it's time to run over these uncivilized lizard men with a little bit of cavalry, swiftly running them down with minimal losses, with many a handbag being sent back to Bretonia. And you know we're doing the right thing because the lady has now blessed us for our actions. But let's not stop there. I want to capture as much territory on Lustria as possible before any of the factions here can build up. And yes, this means we're finally bringing in a few shenanigans. After recruiting a few cavalry units with our handbag money, I then recruit a singular damsel in distress. She's rather expensive though, so we get a few treaties across the pond, declare some wars, and that's gonna get us just enough money to keep her around. Of course, these wood elves are quite a mighty foe, but I've been tasked to conquer Lustria, so I have no intention of actually fighting them. But the AI doesn't care, and they're going to be paying me over 1,000 gold for voicing my support for them. Okay, but why am I going through so much effort to get this damsel? Well, she's useful for how helpless she is, which draws the lizardman army into an ambush. This leaves their settlement ripe for the plundering, which means we have more money to convert into cavalry. And I'm gonna need this cavalry to deal with multiple issues. I gotta finish off the lizardmen to the north, and I also have some reports of some demons infighting down south that I want to take advantage of. We know the demons of Khorne are gonna be attacking the demons of Tzeentch very soon, and because I'm gonna be declaring war on them anyways, I might as well get a little bit of money from the demons of Tzeentch. Might seem a bit mean because I'm totally gonna backstab them later, but their god is literally the god of subterfuge, so I think fair is fair. And also, this is where our penny pinching finally pays off, because I am one turn away from going absolutely broke. But crazy fact about demons, if you kill them, they drop money! Completely unexplainable and makes no sense at all, but it's gonna be saving us in this particular situation. All I gotta do is win a fight against the demons with my ludicrous numbers of cavalry, and you'll finally understand why I've been recruiting exclusively cavalry, and that's because the fine generals of the Warhammer universe are apparently terrible generals. As you can see, my opponent, the Skull Taker, has decided to deploy in a completely straight line with no other tactics being used. And while I'm completely overwhelming his right flank with my cavalry, his infantry are not really doing much to support. In fact, the few units of infantry that did lazily come over to help out are now completely out of position, and they're also going to be getting murdered too. And this does get rinsed and repeated until the Skull Taker finally gets fed up and decides to switch into kill mode. But because I have exclusively cavalry, we can easily disengage from him, slowly pulling apart his armies, and then hammering into the undefended flanks of all of his units. Meanwhile, the other half of his army, witnessing the massacre on the other side of the battlefield, decide that they're better off returning back to the warp where they came from. And so the debt crisis is solved for another 2 turns. But while the Skull Taker is definitely on his last breath, we have a little bit of a problem in that the majority of my territory is completely undefended. And since the peasants here are getting a little unruly, we're naturally going to be selling them off to the highest bidder. Land, peasants, everything goes to Marcus Wolfhart. And because I have a military building on this territory, he's willing to sign a few treaties too. And this is super convenient because we know the Vampire Coast is about to declare war on us, and we kind of want Marcus Wolfhart to keep them busy while I do other things. Like, for example, running over a bunch of my fellow humans in a quest battle for a little bit of cash, baiting out the Skull Taker using the same strategy I did before, and laying waste to Skull Taker's major settlement, leaving a trail of destruction that we're not going to pay attention to. But conquering Lustria is still going to take a while, and having a major deficit with no economy to speak of is not exactly a good idea. But Thankfully, I have a plan, because these Dark Elves are sandwiched very nicely between Marcus Wolfheart and a few Tomb Kings who do value power above all else, which means this territory is perfect for my crusade to stop and rest a while, just as soon as we take out its previous inhabitants. And you know, while the Dark Elf legendary Lord Rakarth is pretty strong, Alberic's been fighting non-stop this entire campaign, and let's just say he's a pretty experienced fighter at this point. So even though there's a second army of Dark Elves coming in, I really only need Alberic and a fresh unit of cavalry to kill essentially infinite infantry. So with the Dark Elf armies thoroughly destroyed, we can now exploit their hubris and take advantage of the fact that their cities are completely undefended. And while heading south to finish the job, it seems like our diplomats have somehow convinced the king to confederate with us. But small issue. Seems like the Bretonnian king has also been running his kingdom at a deficit. But Alberic was assigned to conquer Lustria, not to solve the issue systemic to the system. So we're just gonna literally get rid of our problems here. And while the homeland might be a little underdefended now, I don't really need to pay attention to them very much. Because what do you know, there's a minor lord happy and ready to take over my lands that are about to fall to ruin. And for the rest of the run, anytime a territory is about to fall into rebellion, I just sell it off to a random Bretonnian lord, and magically, the rebellion just gets solved by the AI cheats. Okay, but aside from the cash flow we get from selling a ton of territory, we also get to bring back Lewin straight into Lustria. And with the king now at our behest, we can now activate phase 2 of our plan to conquer the continent. Because all this is part of our rapid expansion plan, because guess what? All the major players that would usually be a problem on Lustria are now gone, and realistically, I just have to fight some Vampire Coast and Skaven, which our army compositions are pretty good against. And right before I go on and attack the Vampire Coast, I also get to confederate the Fey Enchantress, but instead of disbanding the Fey Enchantress, we're going to be sailing her very elite army across an ocean, riddled with armies, death, and scurvy. And of course, to solve our money deficit, we're just gonna deconstruct a bunch of infrastructure, selling the land to the highest bidder. As expected, the Shambling Coast falls pretty easily to our elite cavalry stack, and Lewin, assigned to defend the newly conquered Dark Elf territory, he runs into a little bit of an issue. The unholy alliance of Lizardmen and Skaven are a little bit much to handle, but when it comes to defensive playstyles, it doesn't really matter if you lose a lot of men, as long as you take out enough of theirs where they can't really take your territory. And what's the difference between paying your men a regular salary and constantly hiring new men at a regular pace? And this is gonna buy Alberic some much needed time to conquer a few settlements. And just in time, the Fey Enchantress comes in with the steel chair, so the Vampire Coast don't really seem like they're gonna be an issue for the rest of the run. And the territory, it comes pretty quickly. All I gotta do is head south now towards the tip of Lustria, and the run is done. But there is one just very minor issue here, and that's gonna be 10,000 Skaven. They're basically a bunch of giant rat men who've somehow managed to not take over the world, despite inventing World War II technology early. And since we're pretty far into the campaign right now, the Skaven have some pretty high tier units. Like we got Warp Grinders, who are a weapon team that can net my cavalry down if they get too close. Warp Fire Throwers, which are essentially a World War I flamethrower unit. And Plague Catapults, which severely deplete the leadership of anything they hit. But there's a little bit of a weakness with this army, and that's that they have no anti-large to really speak of. And this is why we save Skaven for last, because they really don't know how to build their late game armies, and I just run over all their expensive tools that are essentially completely undefended. But that's just the first army, and the next one has a lot more infantry. But Alberic here has been pretty aggressive this battle, so that means we are catching them right as they reinforce onto the battlefield, which leads to extreme blobbing. I'm able to get a pretty nice wind spell down the line on the Skaven, and that's gonna hurt their leadership a lot. A few of them rout off, but with so many leadership boosting units nearby, it doesn't look like we can mass rout the entire Skaven force. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna pull back, get into a better position, and once the enemy is a little bit more spread out, then go for some pretty nasty charges. Without the help of their fellow clan rats near them, they just don't have the mass or leadership to stand their ground against our elite cavalry corps. And with all my heroes hunting down the Skaven lords, they just don't have enough on the battlefield, and they completely get routed off. But 5,000 Skaven deaths in total is simply not enough for Alberic. Even though the vast majority of Skaven are now dead, we still gotta finish the job, as that will make taking the rest of Lustria much easier, and, most importantly, much faster. But because the Skaven army this time was in march stance, we get a lot of the same tactics, but the troops are way more tired from being on the march. That means less speed, less leadership, and fewer losses for the Bretonnian army overall. All that's left now is the backstabbing of these Tomb Kings who were previously helping us hold our borders, and auto-resolving our way through Lustria, making sure that we are still spending all of our money, even if it does make a lot of people uncomfortable. And before you know it, in only 4 hours, Alberic's quest is nearly complete. Old Bretonia is long gone. Having been sold off to the Wood Elves, the peasants there are now helping to fertilize all the dryads in the area, and these new lands of Lustria are in absolutely no state to actually be a functioning society.